Welcome to the Narrator Roundtable. I'm André Santana, and joining me today, we have Deanna.
Hello.
Hello, hello. We've also got Lindsey at the table.
Hey, André.
Hey, girl. And Kirt.
Hello, my friend.
Hey, hey. So, as narrators, we know two things. We love storytelling, and we also have bills to pay. And publishing is a pretty tight margin industry. And so, beyond ACX, royalties are pretty uncommon for us. But narrators are prepping, they're directing, they're editing, they're in the TikTok Creator Fund, they're attending conventions, they're starting production companies, right? They are hustling. And a lot of questions came up for me around this. As artists, we often hear or just live the narrative that our career is only successful if the art we do pays all our expenses. But that isn't always true, right? Including for people considered to have successful careers in audiobooks. So what does that look like for narrators? What bags are we chasing and what scenes are we on? I wanted to invite today's guest on anyways, and I was so excited when she said this was a topic near to her heart. And I'm so happy to have with us Emily Wu Zeller. Welcome, Emily.
Hey, I'm happy to be here.
Emily is, and I don't say this lightly, a defining voice in audiobooks. Audiophile Magazine Golden Voice, Earphone winner, Sovis, Audi, etc., so much more. For me, she's half the cast of The Bone Witch, which is the audiobook that made me fall in love with the medium. So thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to the Narrator Roundtable.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I love that you all do this.
It's a great time. We're big. I think we are the biggest fans of this work sometimes. It's such a good time.
Can I ask a quick question? Just because we talk about all the time about like how sometimes you love a project and then you have to leave it behind for the next one so quickly. Emily, what do you remember about The Bone Witch?
I remember that it was. I remember the author's name, Rin Chipeko.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was a book that stuck with me because it was a really fun cast to be able to play. And I, at that point, hadn't yet had the powers that had been tell me no character voices. We're not going to do heavy character voices. The only time that I had gotten that was in the very, very, very beginning when I was fresh off of animation, and they were like, "Okay, you need to vanilla it down a little bit." But other than that first time, I had been working regularly, but this was like a fantasy with wild characters that I got to really dig my teeth into. So that stuck with me.
I love that.
Yeah,
because it's the work we do necessitates the production line. And so it's always just interesting to sometimes hear like which of your work really spoke to one individual person, and then to see how much of that you even remember.
Yeah, for sure. And there's different reasons why books will stick with you, right? Sometimes it's just it was the right place and the right time from both a performer side and a listener side.
Right.
Or there was something special about that author, even if that work didn't necessarily hit all of the right spots or something. You know, the author is a really special person to you.
I remember part of the reason that book stuck with me too is because the friend who recommended it to me worked in film and TV production, and she had read it and she was like, I want to make this a film, and like actually reached out to the author and tried to start something about it. And so when I finally listened to it, I was like, oh, this is coming alive. Like I can see this the way it's being
written.
written.
You just gave me goosebumps. I'm like, thank you.
I kind of want to start the conversation just getting a little bit more from you about like why you've been thinking about this, because when we invited you in, you said this was something that had been on your heart, that you had been on your mind. And can you just share a little bit about that? Like how did you get pulled into thinking about all these alternative sources of income for narrators?
Okay, that's like a two-part question. So for the alternative sources of income for narrators, that is because I am a performing artist, and that's the nature of being a performing artist, and it always has been. So I started as a dancer and singer and was just getting any work I could possibly do, gigging around, teaching and whatnot. And audiobooks were one of the many gigs that I took as a performer. So the fact that I was able to do narration full time was an anomaly. To be able to do one thing full time that's not just a Broadway show was incredible. So that's the outlier, I think. And then once I got more entrenched in the industry, this is the second part of the question. I think for narrators, a lot of people don't know, although I think your audience here probably does know, that we do not get residuals or royalties, or the name is different depending on the rules, for most of the work that is produced. Not all of it, but most of it. And people are often shocked to hear that if they're not in the know, because it changes the trajectory of expectation for your career and for your work. So, like with a startup or any other entrepreneurial business, the expectation is you're going to like throw yourself into the job for 5, maybe 10 years, and then you can sell it. And so you did this job for so long, you did your 80, 100-hour weeks, and this is your baby, and you made the thing, and you did the thing, and you brought it up, and then you go, okay, you are off, and now I can be supported and do something else that will make my life less chaotic. And I found, and I'm not going to blame books for this, this was me. This was the way that I lived my life, 100%. But it was also born of being an artist. It was the expectation that was like, no, you live and breathe your art. Everything that you do is for the work. And what you get paid in is the work, not money. Right? But, the goal is to eventually, like you had said, be able to make your living doing just the work and not having to gig around as much with the non-artist work. What they don't say is that you are going to have to continue to gig within the artist, the work itself, right? So that's a whole nother thing. So I learned that you can climb a hill and you get to the top of the hill and you just realize there's another hill. That you don't get to sit and come down and relax and whatever. You just have to keep going. That what you have signed up for is climbing. You have not signed up for eventually reaching a plateau. You have signed up for continuing to climb. So if you don't enjoy climbing, this is not for you. Right? That's it. Sure, you get certain kinds of tools to climb, which is the art, but ultimately all you're doing is climbing. And for me, what that ended up looking like was some serious burnout. And I've dealt with the repercussions of that. And that's why this is a topic very close to me, is because it has changed my life in the way that I have to live it. And trying to negotiate that with being an artist and continuing to do gig work that doesn't have any later payoff has been a challenge, and also very interesting, I think, and important to talk about with everyone. I think the more transparency that we have around all of this, the better, more empowered we will all be.
Even just starting on the mindset about like continuing to climb. I feel like I'm recently going through something. I'm untwisting the mindset I had about like the strive to like increase your rate and lock out lower rates, and that was much more one-dimensional and limiting than I had realized.
Yeah, and that is very topical because there has been a sea change in the industry since COVID, with a flood of new narrators coming in, which on one hand is great for the actors, and on the other hand has lowered the price that we are able to ask for as a whole. And with AI on the horizon, I don't see that going any other direction. It's just going to continue in this direction.
And I feel like actually all of y'all on the table here have more experience with this than me. I went from corporate work right into audiobook narration. But like Kirt, you directed a theater show recently. Like Lindsey, you talk all the time about coming from the theater world. Deanna, I feel like you're like the master of spades and like having all these different, the multi hyphenate queen. Yeah, how are y'all thinking about this?
Yeah, I had a similar journey to Emily where, like, frankly, on some level, audiobook narration feels luxurious in its in its relative consistency to what I've been doing before. Which was like, for a long time working like a million different gigs, just like, and then moving into like office work and then performing at night, which was also exhausting. Like, this is kind of the first time in my life where I've like had, I'm working for multiple clients, but one job. And I'm like, oh my God, like literally since I was a teenager. But even then I was like working at the ice cream shop and babysitting. So like, this is the first time in my life where I'm like, I do one thing for a minute. Even though that thing is still like, unpredictable and unstable and tricky. But I don't know. I'm curious about how like, I also don't necessarily see like an immediate solution. And some people are smarter than me and can like tap into these little like sort of asynchronous streams of income and other things, and there are strategies. But like, I don't know. Sometimes when I think about it, I'm like, it feels like the greater issue and frustration is like the difference between like being part of like a labor class versus like a wealth class. Because once you get to a certain level of wealth, you are at that plateau. And not because you get to live off that wealth for the rest of your life, but because if you invest it and just like a basic diversified investment, that wealth just breeds wealth indefinitely.
Yep.
I remember I was working as a legal assistant when I in my late 20s, and I worked for an estate planning lawyer. And I used to half jokingly say like one of my jobs was like doing taxes for dead people, which it was like I do the first pass at like the tax return for the deceased, and then the lawyers would like polish it up and do the final thing. But in doing that and looking at all these people's assets, it was the first time I realized I was like, oh, once you have like, if you have $1 million invested, even if you just get mediocre returns, you're getting $40,000, $50,000 a year back. And that's on top of the million. That's not touching the million. So it's not, because I'd always thought of it before as like, oh, well, you have $1 million and you slowly chip away at that, and then it's gone. But I'm like, no, that can just generate indefinitely. And so I don't know what the solution is if you're not able to enter that wealth class where the plateau comes for anybody in any industry, because you just got to keep climbing.
Absolutely. Right. And the I don't know, I wouldn't want to call it a lie, but the story that we've been told is that, like, if you become Leonardo DiCaprio, if you become Scarlett Johansson, if you take the Apple deal to use your voice as an AI, then you get a certain amount of money, right up front, that you can then invest. And it gives you that leap to jump into the wealth class. That this path, being an artist, is a path that you can use to get to wealth. That you can leapfrog because you get that one deal, or you do that one New York Times bestseller that was on #1 for years and years and did not get paid just for the few hours. And instead made residuals, that those residuals are something that you can now invest, and then you have catapulted yourself into the wealth class. Yeah, absolutely. We're a labor class. It's a labor class job.
So, I mean, you bring up the theater gig I just did, which I do not do for the money. Let us be very clear. I probably lose money with all of the mental energy that I have to devote to doing that when I'm also trying to narrate books during the
Kirt,
day.
You're not getting a fat slice of that Green Bay, Wisconsin community theater pie. Come on.
Nope. Well, you know what? I'm getting a decent slice of that pie, but the pie is itsy bitsy. It's so small.
The bite size.
It's just a little pie, and I get my little piece. So I do, like, that is not something I do for the money. That's something I do for like the creative fulfillment and the chance to actually see other human beings. Like that's what the richness of that experience. I have, though, for the last year had a Patreon that was born of a Clubhouse conversation a couple of years ago when Spotify bought Findaway. And the conversation just kind of went to like, well, what if audiobooks go the way of music and it suddenly becomes about streaming, and now your payment is just a cut of the streaming? And like, once that happens, then even if we're getting paid up front for the work, we're going to start getting paid a lot less because they can expect a lot less profit on the back end. A lot of the indie work is going to dry up. And that conversation was like, we as narrators need to start figuring out other ways to make money, because the evergreenness of this work may not be so evergreen anymore. And so I teamed up with an author. We created a podcast. That podcast has a Patreon. We've been producing audiobooks through that Patreon, on the idea that we could build an audience who would like crowd fund audiobooks that otherwise would never have the chance to be made, because it's authors who just don't have the income to be able to pay for it outright. And it was a really cool, fun experiment that we have just ended because it didn't make any money. So like that, like my experience is that I'm still trying to figure it out. Like right now, my audiobook job is sort of funding my search for the next gig that could actually support the audiobook work if it ever dries up.
I mean, for me, stuff just is in cycles. You know what I mean? So like sometimes commercial world is hot. Sometimes if you're willing to travel, you know, theater works really well, or doing the cabaret circuit. Yeah. You know, I've said before, like the reality of one person supplying enough work, right, for you to be able to sustain yourself, like that's just not a thing, you know. So you piece your own pie together, and there might be a little apple here in this slice. Actually, what would that be? That'd be like turnovers, kind of, sort of, right? So like you got a pear one over here, and you got a blueberry, you got a peach, you know, and you put it together, and you know, you make it work. But you know, you just have to be creative in a different way, and it's the long haul to wealth, and it may be you defining what wealth means to you, not so much in the conventional way, not in the capitalistic way. You know, what is enough? You know, and is there wealth in that for you? Like take television, right? I remember watching television as a kid and knowing who these adults were that were on these nighttime soap opera series, you know, watching with my parents and having like a great time. And they had houses and they had kids and they sent their kids to college, and, you know, they helped them get married, and then they had grandkids and all of that. And that model kind of sort of doesn't exist for adults working in the market today. They can't do one thing, even if they are a series regular. Like for that moment, they're a series regular, they're fine. But the minute they're not filming, they need to be doing something else to supplement the loss of that income, because the scale of what it is just not the same. That's why people who were doing daytime soaps, they never left, because they didn't have to, because it took care of everything. And that whole scene is obliterated, which I never thought it would be, which just kind of brings us around full circle to our point that everything is changing. Now, the whole part of this, you know, reality of what we're trying to create that we haven't talked about is like, how's all of that happening? But like literally gas and food and electricity costs so much more. Like, why and how? And so what is the balance of that? I don't understand how that works. It's really different. And what I've enjoyed, I would say, wealth wise, is being able to be in one spot, being able to create roots for a minute instead of literally hopping on a plane, a boat, you know, or driving miles, like actually driving as much as I was working,
Mm.
you know? So I'm not saying that I wouldn't ever do it again, but it's nice to have a break from traveling. It's
Yeah.
just nice to be. So for me, that's the big difference.
Yeah.
But how do you sustain that from today? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know why, but you're making me think too of just like even starting an audiobook career requires such an investment. And I don't mean time and energy. I mean you need to spend some money to be able to. So it's like which of our previous jobs paid for our audiobook habit before it became a gig? And then it's like, oh God, now audiobooks are the thing that have to pay for the next gig. Because is there a way to make money without spending money first?
No, not in a capitalist world.
I mean,
That's
that's the
actually
whole thing.
designed that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's actually designed to benefit the people who already have the money, literally the pockets of it, right? The estates of it, living off of interest and things like that, not the people who are the worker bees, you know, providing the labor that creates that wealth.
Yeah. I think the audiobooks are an interesting crossroads between the artist gig work, the publishing industry, which is its own thing, separate from the entertainment industry, and the promise of the wealth goal at the end of the rainbow. It's all of these things kind of coming together. And we were in, well, I can't speak for anybody else, but I was in the magical moment that was 2009 to 2012 when home studio work became possible. And it meant that you didn't have to live in LA or New York in order to do this work. And I have heard people from before that era talk about how the rates and everything went down at that point, that already started the slide. And I remember when I first started, there used to be a director in the room, and another person. I don't know if they were just like looking up pronunciations for something, and an engineer. And you would go into a studio and you'd record, and you'd get paper, because this was before iPads, that were mailed to you, FedExed, and you would, turn the pages as you were reading the book. It's just, that was only 15 years ago. That was not that long ago, right? So we've seen the whole progression of the thing. Yeah, it's sad. I'm sad. I'm mourning. I'm grieving right now. The what to me really does feel like the end of this boon time. We were in a gold rush, and we all got in on the gold rush, and now it's the fallout. But another thing you made me think of, Deanna, was every artist has to ask themselves at some point, why are you in this? What are you doing this for? Are you doing this for the money, or are you doing this for the work? Because that is going to affect your decision making moving forward. And audiobooks, this is why I brought up the crossroads, is because it was like, oh, this is the happy medium. I can do both. I can. And now we're like, oh no, that's not true. You could for a time, but not so anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been an interesting space for me to be in personally, because I feel like I'm watching so many different levels and types of experience transpire. I feel like we have plenty of especially having come in from ACX, where, I didn't personally come in from one of those, like, can you read English? Do you want to make $400 an hour videos? But it does bring people into the space. That's all to say, though. Like, for me, what I just experienced over the past few months was that I went on a 2-week-long trip. And in preparation for that trip, I was like, I'm going to slow down work around it. And I slowed down a little too hard, and was like, I'm going to give myself like 3 weeks of no work beforehand, so no one needs pickups for me when I'm there. Someone ended up still needing pickups for me while I was there, so it didn't even matter. And then came back to what was meant to be a few weeks of like home records, and then no work after. I did the slowdown, Nothing was building up on the other side of it. I came back, struggled with home records, eventually got them done, and then boom, a cliff. And I was looking at that space and thinking, what did I know what I misjuggled, but also again, like, what are the strings that I can pull on besides just asking to narrate the work? I started directing this year. In part, the narrative is balanced. Part of it is like the love for the work. I want to be able to work on titles that I might not be the right narrator for, but I can be the right support system for. I also wanted to be able to be considered for other projects that would pay money, right? Um, and similarly, on a much smaller scale, like occasionally coaching, right? It's not something that I like run out and seek people for, but it's an option. And I feel like when people think about the network of things that make their income possible, there's all the traditional complicating factors of the fact that we're freelancers and inconsistent paycheck, recognizing that like being hired once does not mean that you have the next book or the next book or the book after that, even if one company really loves you. And I feel like all of that has like made me think about the things that we're talking about. Like, didn't realize this was going to be our Das Kapital episode, but I love it. But two, also really thinking about it structurally and trying to ask myself, like, what are the reasonable things that I can want from this space? Because I know that we talked about kind of like royalties slash residuals. And my understanding of the difference is that like royalties are based on sales and residuals are based on like views, watches, streams, or whatever the equivalent is for the medium. But that like the conversations between the unions and the publishers has been that the margins are so tight that and I've seen it in my own portfolio that I'll put up plenty of books that get 5.40 reviews, and that the high selling books pay for, right, that those titles, they pay for the breadth of the portfolio, and that sharing revenue with narrators would infringe on that like delicate ecosystem. There was a little bit of an incredulous tone in my voice, and I didn't mean for it to be that incredulous.
No, it's true. They could build
yeah.
it in, but they choose not to.
Mhm.
They're more powerful than we are. If we, I don't represent the union. I have been part of committees in audiobook steering committees, and those are confidential conversations, so I can't share exactly what goes down in the room. But something to understand for people who are just coming into the industry is that that's why I mentioned the publishing industry. That is separate from entertainment, and the unionizing of this space has been such. I mean, they've come leaps and bounds from what it was. It used to be, at the Library of Congress reading for the blind, you'd get paid $75 a finished hour, and that was it. So it was not a job. You couldn't make money off of it. Not really. But then the last 15 years have happened, right? And a lot of changes have happened, and it's happened very quickly. And again, it's already changing out of that.
I think part of what I want to grasp at in thinking about like what is it that we can ask for, what are things that we want, is I think that conversation is weird because it's happening at different levels. One is exactly like you talked about, like between the union and the publishers. And sometimes those conversations, as much as we feel like producers represent publishers, is not between the producers at all. They're between people in finance, they're between leadership, even an individual project, and recognizing that every company operates differently, that we don't get to know what the budget, the structure, the expectations are for any given project when we're brought in for it. And even just for ourselves, like I've been trying to, I prep on every book. I hire a prepper on every book, right? That's part of like my internal budget conversation and all those things. I've also started like getting my own studio time because it helps me do work, but that is an expense and a calculation that I have to make. But I feel like all these different tiers of conversation are ultimately, again, about like, what are the things we need? What can we get out of this space? I'm curious about what y'all have seen other people tackling in this regard. How are other people navigating this conversation? What are things that people have been trying? Like, how have you seen folks kind of create this other revenue for themselves and not just rely on narration?
Tack in on
Please,
this?
yeah.
And ask specifically about social media, because I'm a freaking dinosaur and social media is not healthy for me and my brain. I have to use it in a very specific way, and I can't afford a publicity person. I don't have a partner who can pay for anything. I'm a single person, and like I just don't have this financial support to be able to work full time and also be a social media person.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious if to add specifically with the social media streams, if people are finding any success in that, and how, and what does that even look like? That's changing too, right? Instagram and YouTube and everybody has changed their programs that they put in during COVID. They pulled back on a lot of that.
And I mean, I'm a dinosaur too, so I don't have a social media answer for you. I have a very where I'm like, I use it sparingly as I must. But I mean, the one thing in terms of like, there are people who are able to diversify because, and I think Emily, you're a little bit one of these people, right? Who works in like commercial and video game and stuff in addition to audiobooks, but it's still all gig work. You're still gigging just for different clients. I do know like a few audiobook narrators who have managed to like strike royalty share gold. And it is, of course, part of it is because they are clever and they see patterns and they seek out and find indie books that they think are going to sell really well. And they're really good at sniffing those out and finding those. And then obviously like performing them beautifully. So it's a skill thing. But in my mind too, it's also such a like luck thing. It's, it feels like a lottery a little bit, like, a little combo, like a carnival game that they're just really good at throwing that ball. But it still feels like, because there's been a couple times I've been inspired by people like that and I'd be like, yeah, let me look around, let me see. But I have no instinct for that sort of thing. I'm not a publisher. I'm not a book marketer. I'm not and the stuff that I enjoy as an artist and that I read tends to be like fringy and weird. And so I don't have a sense for like what's going to have mass appeal and give me a lot of money. I just don't. I've tried. And even then, like it would be a matter of like essentially reaching out to that author, catching them, like finding them before a publisher did, which would be hard enough because there's a million of them sniffing out there looking for new audiobooks, going through backlists, which is their job. Tantor Podium, they're out there. I assume they have people out there finding this stuff. And so you have to hope like they haven't already been, found, and then that they're interested in audio, and then that you're a good fit. And then, so it does seem similar to what Emily was talking about earlier, where it's like, well, yeah, maybe you do have that like blockbuster breakout hit. Maybe you do have that crazy gig. Maybe you do but that doesn't seem like it seems like a lucky path, a skilled and lucky path, but not like an easy one to follow.
Yeah, I mean, that's literally the publisher's jobs, right? That's their entire thing is to gamble. That's what they're saying. It's like, we're gambling. We can't pay you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have two responses to the two different conversation paths. The first one on the social media front, I am also not like a social media creator who's expecting to make any income from it. And I think there probably are a very small group, like 2 or 3 narrators who succeed at social media to a level where the income is something they even think about. Like it's more than just a nice little a few extra bucks or so. My guess is that it's similar in most industries. Cause I follow, there are really popular nurses on TikTok. There are very popular elementary school teachers on TikTok.
Yeah.
There is room for like a couple of really charismatic, energetic, charming people who have the time, the energy, and the passion for creating content and are comfortable with their own face and body and voice being on the internet as much as they are, in each little pocket of the industries that we're all a part of, that can make it big in social media. I'd be interested in finding out if we think there's a conversation worth having where like a lot of us could find some extra income that way. Because it seems to me that the model is like a few people will strike social media gold. But if there were too many, then it wouldn't be special, and then nobody would be making that little bit of income. So that was first thing. André, did you want to respond to that before I go to my second thing?
One is, I think they're literally, I've for other reasons put together a list. I think there are five
Okay.
narrators with like 5-digit followings that like have gotten brand deals or are part of the creator fund. Yeah.
Okay. And then the other thing, to respond to Lindsey's thing. So like, I am one of those people who I consider myself to have gotten very lucky. I struck gold. My very first audiobook did very well. It was a royalty share. Over the course of that 7-year contract on ACX, like it wouldn't have bought me a house, but it could have bought me a car. And like that over 7 years, like it never felt like a ton of money coming in every month. But looking back on it, it's like, ooh, holy smokes, that was so lucky. Because there were some things where it's like, well, I never have to worry about paying that bill because I know that royalty check is coming. And then right when things started to fade, that author hit it big mainstream and the royalties went right back up. So like, but again, that has nothing to do with me or my skill. It was my very first audiobook. I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I just got really lucky. And I think another part of that success in royalty share world in creating that passive income is just volume. The people who I know who talk about having a comfortable living, even if they recorded no more audiobooks, are the ones who have done hundreds of royalty shares. Hundreds of, like, not 100, but like 300, 400 royalty shares.
Right. So then something funded them to take these projects on for free,
exactly,
to do work for years and years.
Exactly. And so I think that's just another part of like, if we want to be narrators who make money doing royalty share work, you have to be prepared to not get paid upfront. If you want to get something, you have to give something. What we give is that immediate income. We're giving away our time, our work, our skill, our expertise. We're giving it away for nothing on the hope that enough of those projects that we do will make enough money to come back to us and make it worth it. So I do think it's luck. I do think it's some skill in being able to seek it out. It's certainly audacity to be able to reach out to people and be like, let me narrate your book. I'm so great. And we'll make a ton of money together. And then it's also volume. You have to do that enough if you expect to have any sort of passive income that's going to actually be a significant source of revenue for you.
Lindsey had mentioned something that I wanted to throw out as a resource. Publishers Marketplace is a platform where if you've ever seen an announcement that someone just sold their book, that's the place where all those announcements come from. So as titles are sold and it's made public, publishers will list what they've recently purchased there. But there are actually folks like Tantor, Dreamscape also list their audio acquisitions there as well. I get the free publisher's lunch like email, which is every weekday. They'll send you a little summary of some stuff that's been sold. But I think full access is $25 a month, which I've never been able to fully justify. But it's there and available, and folks can start doing that research or even trying to identify like what the patterns are. Like I have seen so many romantasy sales over the past year and a half.
Yes, it's huge. Yeah.
And the other thing is thinking about this social media thing and what's really hard. I've been present on social media and never had the kind of like energy or interest to like really try to dive into it. I've had a couple of viral videos, things I definitely enjoyed making. I feel like I have a clear sense of like what stuff spreads and what doesn't. And I feel like the hard thing isn't just acquiring that, but it is also that like the algorithms are not an arcade machine where like there's a thing you can do to get the outcome you want. It is also a slot machine. There is a lot of luck involved in that process too. Instagram had their own creator fund, similar to TikTok, where folks over a certain following could get funds. And I think that in the wake of the TikTok banning, Meta got really confident and removed that program. I think there's now other ways that are a little more obscure about how you get paid from from Instagram specifically, but that involve reels. The goalpost often shifts. Like image posts no longer really do it on Instagram. It's all about reels. It's all about they want you to turn
engagement, right?
All about engagement, all about how many people not just like, but also comment, save, send, how many people send the video to other people. And it genuinely takes a lot of trial and error to understand that process, because you don't get as much data as maybe you would like to. TikTok will tell you, for instance, over the course of your video, how many people left. So you've basically got 3 seconds to grab someone's attention, and you could lose it at any moment. What they don't tell you is when in the course of your video someone actually hit like or someone actually hit share, right? There might be moments that resonate with people, and if you get enough comments, maybe you can glean it from there. If you really understand the formula of your video work, you can glean it from there.
This is just making me think of street performing. I was just having a conversation with a film TV actor friend of mine, very much along these lines. And he was talking about how street performing is like the realest form of performance art, because you have to be able to grab their attention immediately, right? And I understand that because of the way I came up, and it sounds like everybody or most of the people in this group also came up this way in theater, with real people on stage with each other in a real space. And there's a certain kind of way that you can command a space and grab energy that does not translate to digital. Mm-hmm. And so like the social media way of it's street performing. It's just digital street performing. And it's a different kind of thing. And that's why I'm like, I don't know, bring me back to the people, please.
And there are some people who are naturally very good at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who even enjoy it, which to me is unthinkable. It's unthinkable. But that's why I'm not going to try. Let the people who are good at that and who enjoy it have that success, and I'm going to try something else until I find what I'm good at and what I enjoy.
I already struggle working in a non-ephemeral art form when it's just audio. Like, I still am like, because listen, one thing I miss and love about theater is like, you got up, you did the show, the people there who were there that night saw that show that night, and it only lives in people's memories, and then it's gone. It's like, it's gone. It doesn't have a physical, and I loved that about it. I was like, good. And so it's been an ongoing adjustment for me to be like, oh, work that I did years ago is still out there and people can listen to it right now. Oh no. So I can't, that's hard enough. Never mind trying to like be a presence on social media where it's like, oh, here's a long-lived archive of my face and body doing things forever. It's hell for me.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword for sure. Because on the other hand, I felt very similarly to you, Lindsey. Very much was like, oh my God, this is going to live forever. And anytime I get online, I think this is going to live forever. Anytime I do a video for somebody, like this is not just, I can't make a mistake. And especially with our environment culturally now, like you cannot, everything is a mistake. There is no right way to step anymore is how I feel about it. And I am very, very liberal and lefty. What I've come around to on the foreverness of this medium is that we get to have been part of this gold rush. Like, we're part of it. Our names are in this group of people that 100 years from now, they'll say like, oh, there was this time when humans actually narrated books.
Mm.
Oh God.
I love that. We need a cave, like a wall painting of us in a cave somewhere.
Yeah. But so to circle back to where we started, André, I think for me, I am leaning very heavily into the flesh and into in-person interactions because it is what feeds me and it is what feeds people that I connect with. And I know that there are enough of us out there that we can find connection again. And the monster of the digital world is not actually as big as it feels. It kind of is a snake eating its own tail. If you can manage to step out of that and to be in the flesh and take care of your body and your social connections in real life, then I feel better for that. And part of that was coming out of the burnout and also the pandemic, but the burnout because, like Lindsey said, this work was like, oh, easy cheesy. I get to like sit and like narrate and like read the whole cast, and there's no rehearsal. I just prep the book and here we go. But that had a very heavy physical toll over time.
Yeah.
It's any office job, except it's an office job where you don't get to check out and take a break every so often. You have to be on. You're doing a Broadway play by yourself, but you're sitting and so it's physically, mentally, emotionally very taxing. And it's hard to understand that when you're first in it. I think it's something that really happens over the long haul. When you've done it for a few years, at least, then you start to be like, why is my cholesterol gone up? Why is my blood sugar gone up? Why have I gained 20 pounds? Why does my back hurt? Why does my neck hurt? What's going on in my, and it's this. So balancing having an in the flesh life with this job has been crucial.
And I've also valued, for me, what brings me off the internet, but started on the internet. I do think like all my social connectivity, all my community has come from like Facebook, from TikTok, being able to connect with people and start those conversations there, or even get work there too. I feel like that, to be honest, feels like one of the most feasible uses of social media for narrators that I see is not actually becoming super mega big famous with a ton of followers and making thousands of dollars off of the creator program on TikTok or whatever. It is creating content that you feel aligned with, positive about, that is a reasonable fit for your time, that reaches authors who want to work with you, right? That reaches people who are going to be able to request you or hear an audition from you. And I think that is more consistently feasible and doable with a small amount of buy-in from people than trying to get a million likes on every video and hopefully get a few $100 from TikTok for having stitched something together. It feels possible. It does feel like there is still a lot of hope in this space. I don't know what it means fully that we're 11 straight years of double-digit growth, the industry is growing, but like we talked about with music and the history of music, it shifts other things. But I am optimistic about the stories being told. I'm optimistic about, I think, the people in this space. And I'm optimistic that even though some Audible reviewers have broken my heart in the past and they surely will again, I'm also optimistic about a lot of the audience and a lot of the listeners that I think people who understand what the context fully is about how we arrive as narrators, not just in terms of our performance, but also financially, are willing to buy in, to participate in that process with us. Kirt, like you mentioned, your kind of venture into Patreon didn't go exactly how you wanted, but I do think that is a really cool formula I hope someone else explores it and gives it another shot, because I think there's a lot of potential there. And I really hope that we get more opportunities to, continue exploring this work and the artistry we care about with the people who are generating the funds for it.
Yeah, I will say too, the thing that is overarching this whole conversation for me, to put on my lefty hat, is that we are all seeking individual solutions to a systemic problem, right? Of being in this labor class and having to trade in this work, but I think in all types of work, frankly, but our bodies and our time for money. And those are finite resources. Like we only have so much stamina without burning out. We only have so much time that we can spend doing this work before we have to, see our families and walk our dogs and eat something and sleep and go outside and see a bird. Like those are finite resources. And when you're spending all that you have and still sort of teetering on that edge financially, you haven't won the lottery yet to break through to that wealth class. I mean, it's a scary position to be in because, I think about this all the time. I'm sure you guys do too. We're like, if something goes wrong with my voice, my body, my whatever, like if I lose income for a month, 2 months, 3 months, all of a sudden I'm in a very dangerous place. And I think that's true of most people around the world, and not definitely in America where we are and I'm most familiar with. And so I think something to like keep in mind, especially because in the US we're about to enter a very likely really difficult time as labor class folks. It's about to get harder in a lot of ways, I would imagine. Listen, I hope I'm wrong, but like signs point to things are going to get harder. I think it's also important to think about and look at ways that we can move collectively and we can take care of each other more collectively. Because I'm all here for like, what's another income stream? Can I invest here? Can I start a Patreon? Can I pick up another gig? Can I do this? Great. Like, and thinking about your money and your time and your work and finding a thing that works for you is wonderful, and everyone should be doing it. But also, like, that's not going to solve the problem. That's actually not going to save you. That's not going to save you. That's not going to save me. That's not going to save any of us at the end of the day if we don't have bigger solutions to things like this. So that's also something that like I'm trying to carry into the next many years as we move forward, is like trying to imagine a world and do what I can do as a little person in the world to build a world that is thinking more collectively and that is like looking to strengthen union and labor protections and to build a bigger safety net for all of us.
Well said.
Hear.
Hear.
Absolutely. Bringing us back to like creating the change that we want to see, right? Ultimately.
I have a little anecdote that's related to this.
Please.
Years ago, I got approached by an author who was a woman who had lived her whole life being a very successful business person in the corporate world and decided to write a book that was ostensibly fiction, but more or less followed her life. And when I gave her my rate at the time, this is years ago, so this wasn't even that outrageous of a rate really for an indie book. She ghosted me, and then I followed up, and she was like, well, she responded then. So she was waiting for me to get back to her because she's a business person, so she knows how to handle herself in these things, right? And I'm this artist being like, please hire me, right? And she goes, well, I had sticker shock, honestly, and I thought that, since I'd be hiring you for the 3 books in the series, I'm giving you quantity that you'd be able and willing to take your rate down. And I had a real come to Jesus moment with her when I was like, I can't scale. I am not a factory that you're used to negotiating with, where if you have quantity and whatever, still those resources are coming from somewhere. That did cost the earth and the cheap labor that you hired. But like, especially right here, right now, I cannot scale. So this is how much the service costs. And eventually she came around and we negotiated. I came down a little bit, but I didn't come down as much as she wanted to, because she saw that the reality of that a little bit. At least I hope so.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Me too. It does leave me, I think, with my truth about what I hope for in the future. My favorite quote of all time: "My ancestors' wildest dream was not for me to work."
Yes.
I think as much as what we do can be encompassed into hustle culture, and as much as like Lindsey was speaking to, we do need to pull on these streams too. I also my dream is rest. My dream is doing the craft because I love it and not because I have rent to pay. With that, thank you again, Emily, for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure having you.
It's been really great to be here and talk with you all. Really nice.
Thank you for joining us at the Narrator Roundtable. If you want to join the conversation, find us on social media or visit our website, narratorroundtable.com, to submit a question or a topic of discussion for a future episode. What's on your mind? We want to talk about it.
Come on!
The Narrator Roundtable is produced and hosted by André Santana, Deanna Anthony, Gail Shalan, Kirt Graves, and Lindsey Dorcus. All copyrighted material is shared with permission. Music and sound effects are licensed through Storyblocks Audio. All opinions shared are those of the individuals and do not reflect the positions or policies of any company or organization with which they happen to be associated.